Hello, I'm Michael Redmond, professional 9-dan Go player. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the second game of the final of the 28th LG Cup. So this was played on January 31st, 2024, just a few days ago for me. Black is Shin Jinseo, and he's a 9-dan professional. Byun Sangil is another 9-dan professional. He's white. Okay, Shin Jinseo won the first game, and it's a 3-game match. Okay, just getting into it. It's a diagonal opening. Okay, white plays here. Black plays a kosumi. White plays here. Up to this point, it's what I would call a normal opening. So this was the game move. And it's a point where black had a lot of choices that I would call valid. And apart from the 3-3-point invasions, black's choices would be playing an approach move against one of white's star points. So black could play here. This would be an approach move backed by black's strong position in the top right corner. So that diagonal shape there is a strong position. It's a strong group. And it has potential to spread out into the center, for instance, with moves like this later, where black could play a forcing move from above to start creating a line of stones. So let's just continue the diagram a bit. So for instance, in the future, black might be thinking of doing stuff like this and sort of spreading out into the center while potentially reducing white's area on the top side. So that's one idea. Black could play on the other side. One has to be careful. It's a bit more difficult when you're surrounding territory with a lot of stones on the third line, because there is a tendency to get a bit low. So it's not exactly bad, but black might be, in this case, thinking of just playing one approach move and then moving to a different part of the board, for instance this way. This would be a very intuitive move for me because it's backed by that black corner enclosure in the lower left corner. And this is the direction that we say the corner enclosure is pointing. So it's pointing towards this side. And I say that because there's potential for black to spread out into the center when black dominates the left side like this. Black can continue with moves towards the center, and the fact that the stone at f3 is pretty far to the right, it makes it relatively easy for black to make a more dynamic moyo, an area that black controls. And so this would be my first choice in building from a strong position to try to make a big area. And this would be the old school way of doing it. Okay, maybe this is the one kakari that I would sort of doubt. It's probably not a big difference, but there is the tendency for it to get a bit cramped when white kicks and black doesn't have so much side to deal with. So it would be a passive position, and there could be complications. Just because there's a lot of white stones in the area, it means that black will be on the defensive to a certain degree. This is equally valid. My computer tells me this is the move to play, and from the human context, I would say it's about equal to those other moves I discussed. So just choose the one you like. Okay, so we get into this Joseki. And this is a case where white probably does want to play r2 and get into some kind of a trade, because white doesn't really have much potential on the two adjacent sides, and especially on the bottom side where black already has a corner enclosure in the lower left. So if white does something like this, I don't know if black's going to immediately play at 4, but it sort of demonstrates that the white wall is not really accomplishing anything. It doesn't have an area attached to it. Okay, so white plays here and plays the cut. A very popular Joseki. At this point, black has two choices, and he chose this one. The other move, it sort of involves a ladder. After this sequence, which is pretty much forced almost, black would like to be able to play, in which case, if the ladder favors white, this is usually good for white. In this case, white's wall is facing a black position in the top right, but that position can be approached, for instance, with a move somewhere around here, which will limit black to the top right corner. So slightly more potential for white towards the top right if we compare it with a white wall facing the lower left. So that's why white sort of wants to turn the wall around so it's facing the top right here. This doesn't involve the ladder to the same degree. So when white plays here, black has the choice of capturing at T5 or leaving it. Or he can cut here. So when he cuts here, he extends, and one might say black is making a miai of the right side and the bottom side. So if white extends to the bottom side, maybe black is thinking of playing a pincer somewhere around here. So white played here, and black pincered here. So the reason black is playing a pincer so far away is because actually white has a forcing move here. So the fact that white can always play this stone as a forcing move is threatening to kill the corner. The corner is going to be a ko actually, but it's threatening that. It means that the white group is stronger than it might look. So for instance, if black were to play here, it could easily backfire. So this is just one example of how white could get out. So black is keeping his distance, trying to dominate a part of the bottom side while continuing the fight. And white is playing aggressively, trying to make some space there. So I would say if black plays here, white's probably going to pull back. And it's going to be difficult for black to surround as well as dominating the bottom side. So like if black plays something like this, he gets to the bottom side, but white's going to get out. So black invades it, and it's still forcing. So if black plays on the outside, what black actually did was he defended the corner. So let's just show what happens to the corner here. So black can actually win this fight on the outside. So for instance, if white plays here and black plays here, black's going to capture the 3 stones on the top or the 2 stones on the side. So for instance, something like this. There's no way for white to save both of those groups. It means that locally black's winning, but the corner is not alive. So black can make a ko of it. But this ko is relatively easy for white because white's already captured at 6. There's not going to be so much damage to that white group. And I sort of prepared some ko threats on the left. So like this is a ko threat. And let's see how this turns out. So for instance, if black plays here. So this would be a seki. So white played the hanging connection and black played at R1, defending the corner. And white doesn't want to play this. This is also forcing, but it's going to weaken white's group on the right. So white wants to leave that until a position where it's really necessary. And instead white plays here. And when black pushes here, black is going after those white stones on the right, and it turns into a trade. So in this trade, white has gotten a position on the bottom side. There's some black stones floating about in the center, which we don't really know if black's going to take care of them or not. But black has captured these white stones here. So the 3 white stones on the right. Black has captured these. And it's an even trade. So another 3-3 point. We have something that happened on the bottom side, which degraded the value of the left side of the board. So what I'm saying here is that when black plays something like this, black is not just trying to dominate the left side. Black should also have ideas of spreading out into the center. If black does get the left side, black would like to have it spreading out into the center. But the fact that there's stones of both colors sort of sticking out towards the center from the bottom side, that means that black has less room. So this area, just visually, it should look a lot smaller than if all those white stones on the bottom side, if they weren't there, it would look a lot larger. And so it's not as valuable as it would be in a more clean board position. And it means that relative to this move, the value of this move is getting bigger. And so I understand that. So that's a move that I would be very happy to play. And since the value of the center of the board is slightly degraded because of all this stuff that was happening on the bottom side of the board, it makes sense for white to go after the corner territory. So I like the whole variation here. So this becomes a key point of the game. Black plays this bamboo joint, which gives black a healthy position in the center of the board. So these stones, they've sort of ceased to be a target. and they have some potential to be thickness towards the center. It's hard to say exactly how many points that will make. So at first sight, it looks like a slow move. There's three sides that are relatively important. So let's look at the three sides that I'm talking about. There's the right side, the left side, and the top side. So all of these are important points. So this would be one move, but let's keep it simple. So let's say black plays here. Taking here would start an attack on the white group. So there's some extra value to this move, which improves the position of black's group in the top right corner and is setting up potentially an attack. This would reduce white to probably just one eye on the side. It would be difficult for white to make two eyes with this group. White would have to be moving out into the center eventually. So there is some threat there. It wouldn't be immediate enough for white to answer immediately, but later on there would be some kind of an attack against this white group. So that's a big move because of that. Also, the left side is big. So for instance, somewhere around here, black would probably want to keep healthy distance from that white group in the upper left. So somewhere around here. This is the move that he played later in the game. And the top side, something like this. This is another big move. So just as an example of how it could happen, if black can get sente, that's what the attachment at 1, or that's R11. Black was trying to get that side with sente. So that's one way to do it, and then to extend here. White would probably start fighting on the top side. So that's how I might expect it to turn out. So in the game he plays here, there's something black is aiming at. That's the cut at K3. And so white defended here. This looks just a bit slow. Let's take a look at that. So if white plays away, then black's threat is to cut here. And it could get a bit complicated. So let's see. Let's do this one first. This is the strongest response, but black will bump against here. In this case, there's a Go proverb that says, if you hane on both sides, you gain a liberty. Yohane itte nobiyoっていうね. So that means that by playing these two hanes, that means it's going to take white 3 moves to fill these 2 liberties. So we'll see how that turns out. So when black cuts here, without 6 and 8, white would be able to play an Atari against the 3 black stones. But if white tries that now, black gets to play an Atari back. And so there's no way for white to capture black immediately. So that's how black gained a liberty there. And black can make some trouble for white. So this would connect up everything and cut off that white group on the right. So that's one example of what black is thinking of doing. Otherwise, if white extends down, so this is the variation that I think maybe white should have played. Black can cover here, and this again is a double threat. So if white protects on the right, black can connect up to the corner. This would be a bit troublesome for white. So maybe white's going to capture this. Black can cut on the 3rd line. So this cuts off 3 white stones. Locally, it's successful. But I think this would be okay for white. White just plays an extension. In the process of losing those 3 stones in the lower right area, white got 2 big points. So that was okay for white. So there's the calculation of this threat that black is making. And then there's the positional judgment of whether it's worthwhile to answer that. I think maybe this was just a bit slow in answering black. It protects the weakness because now white can play here and nothing bad is going to happen. And now white plays here. So this is really slow, and I seriously doubt this move. It's making a threat. White's threatening to save the 3 white stones on the right. And so it's a big move. It does get rid of the fact that if white plays elsewhere and black cuts here, there's just a little bit of aji connected to that black stone at 2. So ideally, white wants to get rid of that by playing this move and having black play some defensive move. And then white can play elsewhere. That's not going to happen because the right side is bigger. So I would have extended here. And if black cuts here, it's not a big deal. If black plays here, white will, in this case, white will probably go down to the 2nd line. and the top right corner and the top side, they're mii. So if black plays here, white can jump into the corner. This makes an eye in the corner, and it takes away the base of black's group. So white's group on the top side is pretty much alive, and black's group is not yet alive, surrounded by two white groups that are fairly stable. So black will have to play some slow moves to eventually to reinforce that group. So this would be okay for white. So I very much doubt this move. I think this was a turning point in the game where black did start to take a lead. And he kept it throughout the game. So that's not an easy thing to do. So white added one more move to the lower right. This is actually a pretty big move because if black plays first there, black's going to capture these white stones. So for instance, this move, this would capture the three white stones. Not only is white gaining some territory there, but also white is weakening the black stones on the outside. So all of these stones, these two stones, of course, are weakened, and that strengthens the white group on the right. So it's reinforcing the white group on the right, weakening all of the black stones in the center. So that includes these stones too. So it was worth playing. Black played here. So actually, if black had played here, it would have made my commentary a bit easier, as it would have been simpler. While white has been doing all this stuff in the bottom right area, the white used three moves here, and in the meanwhile, black got the big move on the right, the big move on the left, and this final big point on the top side. So black got to play three moves that were opening points, while white was playing three moves on the bottom side. So I wouldn't really blame this final move that white played, but especially N3, I think that was a very slow move. Actually, people ask me a lot about how to count. And so this is a relatively good example. I say generally in the opening that you don't actually want to spend too much time counting because sometimes it's difficult to interpret what you get. But in this game, it's relatively easy to count the white territories. So white has something like 15 points on the bottom side here. Maybe a bit more, but we'll call it 15 points. This is going to be something like 10 points just in the corner there. And white has two small groups, which we might call 5 points each. So we don't really know if these are going to be territory or not. But I think it's valid enough to estimate. So white has something like 45 points. The black territories are a little bit more difficult. So this, in the lower right corner, we say that all of this stuff is equal. So this whole area, it's either white or black territory. The possibility is 50-50, and the size of the territory is the same. So we sort of count that out, and we can say that black has 7 points in the corner. So it's sort of like komi. In the top right, black has more than 10 points, and then the top side is maybe a little less than 10 points. So we could add those two and say that's 20. And then the left side is not territory at all. So we don't know what part of that is going to be territory. Probably one side or the other is going to be a black territory, somewhere between 15 to 20 points. And the fact that a lot of these areas are not yet territory, they're just potential areas, it makes the result you get from that difficult to translate. It's misleading sometimes. So when black plays here, it gets a bit more complicated. I'll be touching the idea of counting territory later on, showing you a position where I think it's more effective. Okay, so in this case, if white had wanted to play peacefully, he could have played here, and black would defend the cut probably, and white would... so these 2 points are pretty much mii. It's one or the other. And white would have a living shape, and the game would continue. In the game, white goes for a trade. Okay. And this has captured the black group, but black still plays here. So the idea with this move is that if white plays something on the outside, then black can play here. And black actually has room to live. So the combination of 4 and 6 gives black an eye either at G19 or G17. So white pushes through. So it's a key point. This is a key point in taking away black's eye space. And if white goes after the whole thing, this is going to be tricky. So this would be actually it's looking bad for white. It could be a kind of a ko if white plays at m19, but if we just go for it straight, for instance, something like this, this would just be dead. So white's not going to have time to capture the black group. So white has to squeeze from this side. And if we look at that, we can see that black has a fairly good shape here on the outside. So what white does is before squeezing, white plays a cut here to give black bad shape. So this was the game variation. And it's the same thing. If black connects here, white does have to connect here to win that. But black now has a kind of a bad shape. So this exchange of the cut for this move, it could only be played before. And it gives black unstable shape. So that cut there could come into, it could work for white later on in the game. So black didn't want to fill that final liberty, and he played here and here. So this is a point where I'm going to take a second look at the idea of counting the territory. It's still a game where white's territory is relatively easy to count, and black's territory is still mostly potential. But we can say what if and count the territory. So let's start with white's territory. So this territory here, it's 35 points. So it's 10, 20, 2, 4, 6, 35 points. And this was already 15 points last time I looked at it. This territory on the right, it could be 5 points if you just look at this area. But also there's the potential for it to, so if white plays a stone here, white would capture, I've marked the board too much. So if white plays a stone here, white would capture those two black stones. And this area would expand to something more like 15 points. So it's somewhere between 5 and 15 points. So I said this was 35. That's, and this is 15. And so this is between 5 and 15, so I'll call it 10. And so we can say that's 35, 50, 60 points. So white has 60 points. That's a lot of territory. And it's really territory. It's not going to go away unless something drastic happens. So what about black? Black still has just the 7 points in this corner. So just the komi, you might say. But we can say, what if this area in the top right actually becomes a black territory? So if we kind of draw an imaginary line here, something like this. So something like this. And we say everything inside this line with black stones along that blue line, everything inside is going to be a black territory. That's already 60 points. So I think I did a fairly good job of making it 60 points. It's about 60 points. If black gets a line of stones along this blue line and it becomes a territory. So if black gets 60 points there, he's already okay. He's already dealt with all of white's territory, and he has the komi in the lower right corner. And this area on the right is going to be some black territory. It's going to be 15 to 20 points. So clearly, if black gets this, it's a win. So to do it with a diagram, we could say, so what if white says, wow, I have 60 points. So now it's more like 65 points. I have 65 points. That must be a lot of territory. Usually if you have more than 60 points, usually it's enough to win the game in most cases. But if black plays something like that, this is probably going to be a territory now. And it looks like it's going to be a little better than the line I was drawing. So black's already pretty close to white as far as territory is concerned, if we call that a black territory, and black has the advantage of that area in the lower left. So this is a point where in the game where you can do that calculation of the territory, you can count the territory, and you get the information that white has to do something inside that area in the top right. So that's the bottom line. White has to do something there in order to stay in the game. And how to do it is the question. So what white did was white played here and white played here. So these are 2 points where white's trying to open up a hole in the black territory. And this move that white just played at K12 especially, it's a shape move, which hits a weak point, and the weak point caused by this cutting stone. So there's a wedge, because of the damezumari of the 3 black stones, sometimes there's going to be a wedge here, which cuts them off and forces black to react locally. So white's going to be able to push black around a little bit there. And that's how this led to this exchange where black had to play that slow move at J13 to defend, and white had time. White's going to do all sorts of stuff, but white had time to eventually come to this move at K10, which was the move that he had in reserve throughout all of this stuff that was happening elsewhere, which does get some of the white stones out into the center. And he was just creating some extra potential with this stone here as a cut, which could potentially cut off those black stones in the lower part of the center. So he worked hard at it, and he did get to reduce some of the black territory. Going back to the point where we sort of realized that white had to do something inside there. To show you the computer move, I really like this move. So this was a move that I was getting with some of the variations at Karago, and it's a move that is generally a potential in this shape where white has played a Kakari at B17 and black has the Kosumi shape. So it's a move that you find in opening positions and all sorts of fights. And in this case, what white is trying to do is white is going to combine it with the 3-3 attachment to set up this forcing move. So it's very similar to the game, only white has a bit more space. You can see white's threatening the double Atari. White has a bit more space, and when white does play at S18, it's going to be a ko, and white's going to get some real territory there. It's going to be better as far as territory is concerned when you compare it to the game. So this is the variation. Once white has established a potential ko in the corner, white can play all these forcing moves from the outside. And now white is setting up some ko threats in the lower left corner. When white does this, black has no choice but to cut at 20. And this is a ko that when white wins it and captures at R19, that's going to be a nice little white territory. It's going to be a lot better than the potential territory that white had in the game. So that's the difference here. And there's also a hole left at O15. So it's a lot better of a ko than the ko that white actually was going to get in the game. And there's also the fact that white had time to set up some ko threats in the lower left. White got to play the reducing moves like 7 and 11 from the center. It means that white got the profit, the potential profit, in areas like this and this. So it's just a little bit at a time. But the fact that white got to play these moves from the outside makes these areas, there's a real difference in the size of white's areas when compared to what happened in the game when white had to play all the moves from the inside. And white has this ko in the top right corner. So if black wins the ko and white gets something significant on this side, it's still the same 60, it's a bit more than 60 points now in the top right, which is enough to be the same as all of white's territory, only this area in the lower left, now white has more territory than black does on the side. So now white has a local advantage in the lower left. It means that if we count everything else, the territory is about the same, but now white's ahead because white has more in the lower left. So that's how this is working. And the fact that white got to play forcing moves from the outside, getting some extra profit in these areas while reducing the center was a real part of that. So that's why that would have worked slightly better in the game. And that doesn't change the fact that this is a pretty amazing sequence, making use of key shape points that make use of weaknesses in black's shape. So he's making the most of the weaknesses. He didn't forget to mix in this aji in the corner. So if white were to play here, this would be a living shape. So it's the living shape. And if black plays here, white gets to connect up underneath. Otherwise, white could play the ko. But this ko, white does stand to lose a lot when black takes at K18, then takes again at J19. That whole side is falling apart. So maybe white plays the ko, might play this move. But you can see how white's not getting so much of black's territory in this case. Black's still getting the corner. So white left that, but he has to return to the center because he's already started stuff in the center. Makes the center pretty big. So he has to continue in the center. And black got to finish that group off. So now it's just dead. So there were some, if you ask a computer, there were some small mistakes. But after this, black seems to have pretty good control of the game and is keeping ahead. So let's just go through it. Black does have to deal with this group, which is being cut off. So black plays here, connecting up to the left side while defending the cut at g10. This was a forcing move. And if white plays away, black can play down. This would make a life in the top left corner. So that would be big, obviously. All right, so black is threatening the white group, but white can play at m15 at any point, and we'll have an eye there. So black is more focused on settling the corner and keeping as much of this territory on the left, or the lower left area, keeping as much territory as possible. So this area and this area, they're sort of miai. Black's going to get one or the other, probably. And when you're behind like this, there's really no way for white to win. Black has a small lead, and so the only thing that white can do is he can try to keep the game active, complicated, and without black making a mistake, there's no way it's going to work anyway. So he's trying to keep a volatile position. And here he's threatening the cut at g10, and black has to defend. So white's doing this stuff. It's very difficult for white to cut black off in both parts of the board. So there's this part of the board and this part of the board, two areas that potentially black can dominate. So it's very difficult for white to do everything he wants to do in both places. So he's cut black off, but there's still a black move at e12. So white plays here. So he's starting to make some territory potentially on the left side, but black can play here. So this cuts off those two white stones in that part of the board. And white played this move. So this is a tesuji. It's an example of how tesuji come into play in actual games. Obviously, if black plays here, this would be the easy one. This white's already sort of set up for this, and white can just capture these. So that would be too easy. This is the move that you might think works, but if black plays this way, white can get a ko. So with 6, white had various ways to do it, but yeah. So there's a ko here. And this would be working for white. So like white would have ko threats, local ko threats like this. So black played here, and we made a trade. So white did succeed in cutting off those two black stones, but it wasn't good enough. So this is actually a win for black. It's getting to be a fairly close game, an endgame. So the ability to play a perfect endgame is actually a part of the reason that black's going to win the game. You can see black taking away white's second eye here, so white had to respond by connecting up in the center. Right. So we're ending the game. My computer said that white should have this was a losing move, sort of, and that it would have been slightly closer if white had not done that, and actually has a bit of a squeeze here, which would have been slightly better, but I think it's still a win for black. Okay. Okay, there's one more tesuji I want to show you. Okay, white plays here. So what's this move? This is actually very similar to the snapback tesuji that many people will be familiar with. White's setting up a snapback. So if black plays something on the outside like this to try to cut off that white stone, white would be able to play here in the corner. White's about to make two eyes with a move at q18, so black would usually want to play here. And this is a ko, so black will fight the ko, obviously, but if black connects, this is a snapback. So that's what white is setting up. So black just simply cut here, and this became a forcing move. So that was a successful endgame sequence by white. And black is still ahead. Let's just take it to the end now. And now white resigns. So this was the end of the game, and Shin Jinseo won the second game 2-0, and he took the LG Cup. So that's it for this game. I think I'm just going to recap and go back to that position where, yes, I think white just put too many stones here. This is sort of debatable. This move, it's a big move that takes away the cut at k3. But like I said, I would have played away. And this move, I think, is really a shape where white should not have added a second move there. So this was maybe just because his opponent was Shin Jinseo. Shin Jinseo took it to the end without making any losing mistakes. So in a way, you could say this was the losing move. So thank you for watching to the end, and that's it for this video. See you next time.